All right, hey guys. So I know a lot of you are thinking about buying property here in Mexico, and a few weeks ago I took you guys down to look at a property that's for sale here in Chapala. So today we're going to go talk with Spencer McMullen, who's the expert not only on immigration matters, but also of buying property here in Mexico. So let's go see what he has to say. All right, well, cool. Well, thanks, Spencer, for talking with me again.
You're welcome.
And so today we'll be talking about real estate, buying real estate in Mexico.
Sure.
And we talked a little bit beforehand, and on my own research, and I'm sure the viewers researched as well, it's a bit different than buying Mexico in the United States. To me, it seems the whole thing seems complex, but to me it seems more complex than the United States. But you definitely need a lawyer here in Mexico when buying property.
Well, it's good to have an attorney represent you. You've got different parts of it. So you've got, finding a property. Well, I'm not going to drive people around and say, look at this, I don't know what's on the market, I don't know what's a good deal or bad deal. Well, that's where a real estate professional would help, because they're going to know, oh, this is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house on a lot that's this size. Is it a bargain to buy it now, or is it overpriced? That's where they come in. However, if we let's look at the deed. Are there any red flags? Doing due diligence. There are people that are selling properties that aren't theirs. There are forged deeds. There are, you can look at deed and something looks funny to take an extra step. There's no title insurance per se in Mexico. Most transactions done without it. You don't have all the title insurers. So there's that risk you're bearing buying a property where you might have a problem after the fact. That's where someone can come in, an attorney who has experience in real estate transactions, who knows what to look for, not just looking over the contract, which is an important part to bind the buyer and seller and make the agreement, but look at the title, look at things, for example, if there's construction on the property recently. So one common practice in Mexico is they don't pay the Social Security employer payroll tax, and if they build a property, the IMSS tax authority has 5 years to come back. Well, they'll go after the property because the employer can shut down who knows who they were. So if they go back and see, oh, you built 3,000 square foot property and you didn't register the work project with IMSS. People will say, oh, I'll give you an architect's letter, was paid, I'll pinky promise, but that doesn't matter, because without the registration of the project, the final sign-off, IMSS can come back up to 5 years. Let's say they come back 4 years later and say, we're gonna fine you 2,000 pesos per square meter of construction. That could be 2, 3, 4, 500,000 pesos plus penalties. And if someone didn't check for that, or ask for the finiquito, or put it as a condition, then you're out 500,000 pesos and have to fight with the tax authority or more. That's just one example of something that is kind of hidden, that if you don't look for it, it'll come back to bite you.
Right, yeah, but with a good lawyer, that is something that you do, is you research into that.
Well, there are many things we look at with the title, with the property, make sure that the building square footage matches up, nothing looks funny. Look how the buyer acquired the property. Did they acquire it through what's called in U.S. adverse possession? Did they sue and have to get the property? What's the history? That'll often tell us a lot. If it was arm's length transactions, the last 2 sale transactions, then it's probably a bit safer than something different. Everything boils down to a level of risk. So the more risk, the more one should be cautious and maybe ask for extra paperwork. It's not necessarily a deal killer. Many real estate people say, oh no, don't get an attorney involved, or they'll offer their in-house attorney who rubber stamps everything. If it's a good deal, it's a good deal, and they should stand behind the properties they're offering for sale.
Right, yeah, exactly. And you're telling me before this that it's a good idea for the closing contracts with the house, that you want to have that it's a good idea to have an attorney
yes.
draw up the contracts.
In the U.S., we come from a place where there is an escrow company that handles it, and there's a contract, and even the California contract disclosure, probably 8 or 10 pages, and we're not as litigious as the U.S. But if a real estate company has a contract that's a page and a half, then that might not be protecting you. In the US, they'll take faxed or email signatures. Mexico's still very formal. If there's a problem you need to sue, they're gonna want a live wet signature, which means extra copies, originals, every page signed. Most real estate companies use invalid contracts in Mexico because they don't comply with terms. Profeco, the Federal Consumer Protection Agency, has rules and guidelines. Most contracts don't apply and are technically invalid. Probably, I gather, 80% that are used in Mexico by real estate agencies. A good contract will probably be 6 or 8 pages with clauses, with contingencies. A lot of contracts they make, they say, oh, we don't use contingencies. Well, that's a lie. They're just lazy, or they're using a master contract that doesn't have it to maybe protect their commission, but not protect the buyer. What about inspections? What about red flags? What about other stuff? So there's a bit, there's stuff lacking there.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so how long, what is the process like, or how long does it generally take from saying like, okay, I found my property, to being able to move in, to doing all the paperwork?
I mean, it can be quick. So, you have preparation of a contract, but to prepare the contract, we'll need to see, all right, the water bill for the property tax bill, to make sure, one, the taxes are paid, and see what is the declared constructed square footage and lot size. And in Mexico, closing costs are higher. So closing costs are about 5% of the property tax value. Now, the property tax value is between 30 and 80% of the real value. So that declared value is going to be on the property tax statement. So therefore, we can calculate what the closing costs are going to be. So the buyer knows what they're going to pay. Also, with the water bill, the tax bill, the real estate deed, we can verify the no liens in the property. We can prepare the contract, and also see if anything extra is funny or out of place. There'll be another tax appraisal done, but the value is generally the same as the property tax bill.
Okay.
Foreigners, there's permission from the Mexican government to purchase. Permission in a way. It's kind of a waiver agreement, which right now we're in a uncharted territory because there was a computer error. There have been no agreements for a few weeks, actually about a month.
All the COVID mess?
No, not well. With the COVID, the local offices aren't doing them for exterior relations, Mexico City, and their computer broke. So effectively, you have the whole country with no foreigners being able to buy property, which is a bit ridiculous. They're supposed to be fixing it, I think this week, they said. But we'll see how that comes out. So we have that permission, which we just hand carry to the office here 5 blocks away, take 2 to 5 days, done. You've got the tax appraisal that's done. You have the certificate of freedom of liens. All of these things are gathered, so that way the notary transcribes in the deed. It's not a one-page deed like in the US, but it's a transcription of every certificate showing the title is clear. So that we've got proof of that. Well, for this per property. So there'll be the proof the water's paid, proof the property taxes are paid, proof the property's free of liens. For the anti-money laundering statutes, that it was a bona fide transfer from buyer to seller. No weird third-party stuff. A little paragraph about how the seller acquired property.
Because all that is attached to the house, is that correct? Not specifically to the previous owner?
It's all runs with the property, because people disappear, but the property's not running anywhere. It's easy to find and locate. 2, we always ask people, another issue that's come up is the electric bill. Now people think, well, why get the electric bill? This is important even renting too. Because what if there's an issue with electricity, with someone stealing energy, or there's a big short on the property? Instead of having an electric bill of 800 pesos every 2-month billing cycle, it could be 3, 4, 5, 6,000 pesos. And for a smaller price property, that's a big chunk of money that you're paying out for nothing. And it's good to know if there's an issue before you buy. Well, how would you know? Well, the home inspector could or could not catch it, but if you see high bills, then you better prepare to either fix an electrical problem or plan to spend an extra 8,000 pesos every billing period. The same with water too. If the water bill looks extraordinarily high, there's a leak, the tank leaking, that could be a hint of something larger to fix.
Yeah, that's good advice.
So you sign the contract. That can be a couple days. Do due diligence, prepare the contract. The permission from exterior relations, let's assume we go back to the old system, 5 days. The appraisal, the tax appraisal, called the avalúo catastral, That takes 3 to 5 days, and the tax office 1 to 5 days to approve it. There was a time when here in Guadalajara, Chapala was taking 2 to 3 weeks to approve it. So as far as when you can move in, I mean, contract couple days, the permission foreigners a week, appraisal 1 to 2 weeks, but in some cases more, and then when the notary preps the deed. So closings could be as little as 2 weeks, could be as long as 2 months. Now in Mexico we have the normal zone, we have the restricted zone.
Okay.
So
yeah.
for Mexicans to be protected against foreign invaders,
Right. Yeah.
they put restrictions to make sure that no foreigner can have fee simple ownership in the restricted zone, which is 50 kilometers from the coast or 100 kilometers from the coastline. In those areas, a foreigner can't own a property outright. Then you do it through a trust.
Yeah, and so that applies to it doesn't apply to Guadalajara or Chapala, but it does apply to we were to Cancun or Puerto Vallarta.
Cancun, Puerto Vallarta, even in Colima, I was saying, I think Comala is 51 kilometers. You get any closer, trust. Or if you go to Ensenada or you go to a place that's 100 kilometers from the coast, you have to use a trust, which is an extra layer of bureaucracy, cost of about $300 to $500 a year for the trust. Now, the upside is you're paying $300 to $500 a year for the trust. One benefit is you can name beneficiaries directly in the trust. So for estate planning, here in Jalisco, you can designate beneficiaries, but they must be a parent, child, or a spouse. You need to prove that. Well, you don't have that restriction. Other states don't have that ability at all to designate beneficiaries in the deed. In a trust, you can do it. So that's one of the benefits. The downside is you're paying the money. You've got to have a trust instruction, pay fees, whatever you want to do. You can shop around for the trust too. So there's not one bank. One issue that's come up with some of the trusts is that they're the technical owner of record. So there might be a clause in the trust, hey, you can't rent this property out. Maybe someone buys a property, is told, oh, buy this beach house, rent on Airbnb, but read the trust agreement. Because what if there's a prohibition? Because at the end of the day, if the bank is the owner of record and someone's renting it and doesn't pay taxes or there's a problem, the bank gets sued. So the bank, to limit their liability, says no rentals. But if one bank has that clause in the trust agreement, which is basically a contract, find another bank.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, the end of the day, you can't buy. It's just, all right, there's always options.
Yeah, yeah. And I mentioned there are lots of foreigners that do rent out with Airbnb.
Yeah, I mentioned a look at the agreement. So when you buy a property, you're not violating the trust agreement right off the bat. It's not, oh, they won't do anything. Well, that's not good advice. It's if there's 3 banks and 1 or 2 don't have that prohibition, use that bank to not be violating the agreement right off the bat and have future problems.
Right, yeah.
If they can be avoided.
Yeah, good. Yeah, cool. I wanted to ask a question from one of the comments on Facebook about a loan, like mortgage. And let me see who asked it. What options? Oh, so Carly Leach asks, hey Carly, what options do foreigners have for loans in Mexico? Do you know? Can you talk about?
Well, I mean, a lot of people come with misconceptions for loans in Mexico because money's been easy in the U.S. I mean, with the subprime crisis, things have tightened up a bit. You don't have Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and these investors putting money in for loans in Mexico like you do in the U.S. In the U.S., you've got FHA, VA, besides Fannie and Freddie, where you get people putting 5% down, 3% down, some loans for people with bad credit, no income verification. Here, loans are foreigners because you don't have that huge pool of funds. You're looking at paying an interest rate of 8 or 10%, being a tourist buying in Mexico. You've got obviously the higher closing costs, and they'll want you to put about 30 to 40% down. And they want you to have reserves or a few months payments in the bank and excellent credit, improve your income. So it's not, 5% down, hey, they understand that these people aren't living in Mexico. So now when you qualify, you're qualifying with your US housing payment and your Mexican housing payment. Because if you're living here full time, well, how are you working in the US unless it's telecommuting? So that's a large difference. We do have foreigner clients who are residents here, young people that do work. They have their permanent or temporary residence, and we work with them to buy houses here, getting a Mexican mortgage, but it's a bit different. They're generally 20-year terms, not 30-year terms. So with a 20-year term, your payment's higher. You're also having an interest rate between about 9 and 11%, and they're going to have you pay that interest rate plus an administration fee, sales tax administration fee. You've got unemployment insurance, life insurance, and home insurance. So all those little junk fees add up to an effective interest rate that could be 11 or 12%. And with that 20-year term, it's harder to qualify. So it's not as liberal as, you know, in the US, put 5% down, get mortgage insurance. Your mortgage payment will be, you know, up to 40% of your gross income. You've got a lot more restrictions here in Mexico, and with the shorter term, your payment's higher, which means you qualify for less of a house.
Okay, all right, great. Talking about like ejidos before, maybe we could talk a little bit about.
So, generally,
what's an ejido, I guess?
Well, an ejido is a, you know, a group of people working the land. You know, in the old system of Mexico, you had, you know, monopolies over land. You know, you had the Mexican Revolution, and you had the Mexican government give land grants to the peasants and poor farmers, so they're guaranteed a place to live, land to farm, to be able to survive the way they've done for generations. It would be like in the US, you have Indian reservations. Well, a regular person, don't have any Indian, so I can't just go buy a house on the reservation. You might be an area where houses are $200,000. Oh, a house on the reservation, $50,000. But if you're not Indian, you can't buy. With the ejidos too, a foreigner cannot buy ejido land. They cannot have anything to do with it. It's only a Mexican national. Now, there have been issues with the ejido land because if they disincorporate or privatize a parcel, it's a corporate process where there's a meeting that's called. They must notify all the participants. They vote. Are they going to extract the property from their, you know, Indian or group land? And that's where the problem lies. If they fail to notify a person, there's no statute of limitations when a person can file a claim and say, I want to annul that land transfer. So if you bought it from someone and they had it from someone that was privatized and it's annulled, all of a sudden now you're fighting a lawsuit. They could cancel your deed and you have to buy your own property back. In the Chapala area, there are landowners that are adjoining, and we've worked in some cases we've had to help them get deeds back from the 1920s because the ejido is saying, oh wait, this condominium complex part is on our land. Well, mysteriously someone's stolen all the posts and markers, and 30, 40, 50 years ago you didn't have GPS, you didn't have the accuracy to mark and plot property, and they're claiming that these properties are 10, 20, 30 feet in La Chichilco, by Ponciplan, on the eastern part of Lake Chapala area. You've got people that have lost their properties and had to, there's a settlement where they're actually having to pay 10% to buy their property back. Imagine buying a house, paying the price, now you've got to pay attorneys in a lawsuit, and now you have to buy your own property back. So anything dealing with the ejido, it's best to avoid because it's very tricky and treacherous to check the title. It's not like a normal title search because the records are on the property registry. You need to check the corporate formalities of how the annual meeting was called for the ejido or the other groups, the voting, the notifications, everything else. And any defect can mean a possible nullity action. And that's a high price to pay, especially in a place where there's no title insurance.
Mm-hmm. Is the ejido usually like only in more rural areas, or like in Guadalajara, would there be a ejido?
Well, actually, no. Well, it's interesting. In one of my classes, they said there's no ejido land in Guadalajara, but you have it in Zapopan, you have it in Chapala. You have places that were generally more rural where the government gave grants to the peasant farmers so they could work and survive.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, cool. Well, let's go to another question. We might have already touched on this, but it's from Juan Sanchez. And it says, can non-Mexicans purchase land, property, or does a trust need to be set up? So yeah, we kind of talked a little bit.
Well, and people always ask, do I need to be set up by property? No, tourists can buy and sell property, and you can buy in any zone. But remember, if you're going to buy in the restricted zone, you'll need a trust. But you can buy as a temporary resident, a permanent resident. You can buy as a tourist. Buying in the restricted zone, you'll have the trust, but you have to watch out for some kind of scams where they try to sell you these packages. Oh wait, get a Mexican corporation, and you don't need the trust. So people often are foolish, worried about not paying the $300 or $400 a year for the land trust and doing corporation. Well, a Mexican corporation means forming the corporation, corporate formalities, meetings, and so forth. Corporation doesn't have capital gains exemption. So you want to sell the property, you buy it for $1 million pesos, now you sell it for 2, guess what? Corporations pay sales tax, they pay capital gains tax. So now to save a few $100s, you're paying thousands in taxes, plus corporate formalities to keep the corporation going and so forth. So it's often not that good of a deal.
Better just to set up a trust.
Well, use the trust, yeah, use the trust, because look at the positive side, it's a good estate planning tool, and they look at the trust as an extension of the person, which means you get the capital gains exemption. Now, we talked a bit earlier about capital gains. You can avoid capital gains or exempt capital gains if you have your temporary or permanent visa. So that's another reason, because foreigners, let's say you bought a property for 1 million pesos, over 2 million pesos, they would withhold 25% of the sales price. Now they're going to nick you 500,000 pesos. But if you're a temporary or permanent resident, you get your CURP number, which is like a social security number, then you get a tax ID number, and if you show 6 months utility bills, usually electric, which is CFE, or Telmex phone, then you can exempt the capital gains, which is tied to an index. So it's indexed for inflation. So they're UDIs, unidades de inversión, or investment units. So your exemption is 700,000 investment units per person. So at today's rate, with the UDI being 6.55, that gives you about 4,600,000 pesos in exemption. So if someone buys a house as a tourist, or even inherits a house, we offer this to heirs when we do probate. Your dad bought a house many years ago, and due to devaluation of the peso, maybe he paid 100,000 US, which was 1 million pesos. Well, let's say he sells for the same price, 100,000 pesos. But with 22 pesos dollar, now it's 2.2 million, you have this phantom capital gain. So we offer some people, hey, let's get your visa going, so you sell it as a resident and not a tourist, and that way you avoid capital gains, you avoid the 25% withholding.
Okay, great. Yeah, awesome. What other questions we got? Just to do a quick check on time. This is a word that came up as I was doing some research about buying property, and hopefully I'm sure you can clear it up. So what is fideicomiso?
Fideicomiso is a land trust.
Okay.
That's the Mexican word for trust.
Okay.
So we talked about trusts. In Mexico, all real estate closings are done with a notario. Now people say, well, notary? My cousin was a notary. She took a class, paid $20, and she had her stamp. In Latin America, the figure of a notary public is way different than the US. In the US, there's no education requirement. You pay for a bond, you take a test, and you get a seal, and you get a journal. In Mexico, there are 3 classes of attorneys. So I'm the one class of attorney, went to law school, did my social service, took my exams, and I have my license to practice all over the country the rest of my life. There's a higher class, which is your regular attorney, you have a postgraduate degree, and then you can be a public broker por lo público, and they have certain functions like corporation formation, taking certain evidence, certifying copies, insurance documents that the base level of attorneys can't do. Then you have the highest level, which is notary public, which they want, you take an exam, you need a special grant from the governor, 5 years litigation practice, 3 years internship, postgraduate degree, and you must be Mexican. So I have all the things except Mexican and taking the test, but because I have a US nationality, I can never become a notary. And they have exclusivity on everything the other guys can do, plus wills, certifying copies, and doing real estate transactions. So only a notary public can do the real estate transaction to register it in the property registry. So that's why you must go through a notary for all transactions. You know, regular attorney or someone saying they'll do a deed won't work. At the end of the day, you must appear in front of a notary. And foreigners also need to prove their status in Mexico. So anyone in Mexico illegally can't buy a property because you need to show your immigration document as well as your passport.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, cool. I think we're getting almost close to time. Went by quick. What else? Is there anything? I think we covered a good amount of basics.
Yeah, just a couple things. In Mexico, there is no escrow. So that's important. Many people say, oh, well, no, I'm going to put money in escrow. There's no escrow in Mexico. The two title companies that were from the U.S., they were Stewart Title and First American International, were based outside of Mexico, had their accounts outside of Mexico. Real estate companies will facilitate or allow deposits to be made in the U.S. accounts to facilitate a transaction. But it's not like we know in the U.S. where I was licensed, I was required to have my accounts audited, give my bank statements every quarter to the regulatory agency. There is no government oversight in these escrow accounts that these real estate companies have, and real estate agents are not licensed. You have a movement, you have professional organizations who are moving towards encouraging their people to be to take classes and get certifications, but still there's no licensing. Right. Anybody who's 18 can print a card and say I sell real estate. So with the lack of licensing, if they say license, it's a business license, which is a tax to hang something and say you pay the municipal government, but nothing to say you have no criminal record, you took a test, if you don't follow good procedures or you violate something, we're going to take your license. So there's not that risk for the agents here. So it's good to use a reputable company that's been around, because if they were breaching people's trust or violating things, they probably would have bad comments, so they wouldn't be around, and they would get sued. It's good to use a more reputable company, someone that's been around for a while, and you'll talk to them and you'll get to know that they know their stuff versus somebody else who doesn't know what to look for in a deed, who hasn't even checked out the property they're selling. A good agent will have all the documents required for a purchase transaction ready from the seller, because then they'll need those sooner or later, and that if there's an issue, they'll hopefully have corrected it for closing.
Okay, great, yeah.
See, one other thing is timeshares. We get a lot of calls about timeshare scams. People buy timeshares in Mexico, and then there are these companies that do robocalls or spam emails saying, oh, we have a buyer for your timeshare. You pay $10,000, they'll pay you $40,000. And there'll be an escrow company in the US, there'll be a real estate company in the US, there'll be the buyer, and everyone has slick websites, but all these websites are 2 to 3 months old, and they'll present you with contracts and say, oh, you as a foreigner need to pay this fee, it's $4,000 to the Mexican government. They'll present documents from the Mexican tax authorities, from an international accountant, and they'll promise to refund everything at closing. But the property never closes because everyone involved is fake, all the documents are fake, and they'll bilk you out of a few thousand to $50,000, and they shut off the website, and the companies don't exist. We had one yesterday that it was an escrow company in Iowa. We called the Iowa Division of Banking. They don't exist, they're fake, they're a fraud, and they're trying to get people to pay a fee that was refundable. They were getting guaranteed to refund it, all these official looking documents, but the company doesn't exist. The people, if they had paid the money into a Mexican bank account, which no US escrow company would ever have money go outside of the country, they would lose their money.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Was there anything else? I think so much. Is there anything else you want to mention? I think we got a good basic.
I think we covered pretty much everything. Trusts, land zones, restricted zone, closing attorneys, due diligence. But it's important to do due diligence, and usually can be done quick. There's a tip too, which everyone should do out there. So when you buy a property, they can do what's called an aviso cautelar, which effectively freezes the property from buyer to seller, to make sure that the seller, if they're a bad guy, they don't sell to somebody else. You can register your deed and find out it's rejected because it sold to somebody else. But it could be something as innocent as a scammer or fraud guy wants to go forge a deed or forge a power of attorney. So it basically freezes the transaction between buyer and seller. And a lot of notaries don't do it because they're lazy, but request it, and that's a tip to make yourself bulletproof for most sale transactions, because the aviso cautelar is part of the certificate of freedom of liens, which guarantees no liens on the property. It's effectively a lien on the property saying this property is in contract from this person to this person. And that's an easy tip. Insist with real estate people and your notary, and you'll avoid many problems with that.
Okay. All right, so thanks for watching the video. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already done so, become a patron at patreon.com, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys very soon. Goodbye.